Episode 5. Um, yeah, here we are. 5 episodes in, if you still listen to my meanderings, and if the last episode didn't make you run for the hills and call me a fraud or some sort of or crazy man, then welcome back. I might lose you in this one too. No, I'm not trying to get rid of you all. It's interesting if anyone's actually listening to these things because I'm meandering for 30 minutes. I'm just talking tangentially about random things while listening to cars pass outside my window. Um, I should, I know there's full well there's ways to like block out that sound, but I'm a game designer, not a tech, and I'm not gonna try to be one. And so I'm just gonna let you enjoy the sweet sounds of rolling cars outside my window. Um, so many rolling cars. You probably don't hear them, but I do. Anyways, it's likely that this microphone's picking them up. So what am I talking about today? I thought maybe this would be an interesting thing to do. Is that now that we're sort of finally out of these 31 days of games and it's some time to breathe, um, that we talk about my design philosophy and how I design, how I approach design. I write very fast, as you saw, 31 days of games in such a short window of time. There was some games that got scrapped just because it was a lot, and we actually had some super large games that were just like, we're not going to give this one away. So 31 days of games was as from episode 1 was something we approached as a let's just try this out, let's see how this plays out, and I approach design with the sense of here's a game, and how do I create the feel of this game? How do I create this? And so a lot of like my thought process is imagining how I would be on a table playing a game, and how does the mechanic sort of like interpret my feeling? How does it how does the mechanic create the feeling, interpret the feeling of the game? And so it's so I have to first ask myself, what am I feeling for a game? And so I think what I'm gonna do here is talk about making a fictional game. Like, I think let's make a fictional game. Like, I'll talk about how I would approach it, and I'll go over sort of like what I'm thinking as to what the game should be or what the game should look like. Okay, so first of all, we've got to create a game. We've got to create a notion of a game. So let's just assume that I would like to create a surfer game. Like, I want to create a game about surfing. Well, most people would be like, let's do some research on surfing. And I'm just like, games, for me, one, I have knowledge, so I'm fairly, whatever I feel I know about it, that's what I need to go with my initial knowledge. If I don't know anything about it, then why am I writing a game about it? But from what I understand, there's surf moves, there's surf from watching surf movies, so you really don't need to overcomplicate the situation. The first thing to do is just approach it with, okay, so what do I want to do? Like, what do I want to do? Like, I'd like to create blank, and if you can't sum up your game in like one sentence, you have to really kind of get to that. You have to really like, you have to get it. It means your focus is really off. Like, you need to focus it down. If you can't define a game within a sentence, it's really that means that your focus is all over the place. Well, it's really, I've heard it before where it's like, oh, it's really about it's about gods, and it's about and then you have to be these knights, and these knights have to go off, and they have to go take on a dungeon, and but in those dungeons there's like there's monkeys, monkeys, and they have god powers. And I mean, at the onset, like, what is the game about? Like, what is the mission statement to a game? How do you sum it up? What's your tagline? And so that's how I first approach it. That's the first thought process is how do I what's my what do I want to do, and then how can I define what I want to do according to just one sentence. So I want to do a surf game, and with there's so many different things, I have to ask myself what's the biggest focus. Well, I think like I don't know enough about how to surf to make a surf game. So I think it'd be really cool to do sort of like a surf culture game, like a game where like the surfing is not as important, but sort of the surf city culture. And maybe I liked it to be more focused on like a 1970s, like 1980s Lords of Dogtown vibe, like this sense of like, well, there's the skate culture, and then there's the surf culture, and it's and this is where you kind of see some like the bad boys of like surfing trying to come up, and some people who do things differently than what was done. So like once skate culture really, and surf culture kind of like clash with each other, then you kind of see some changes happening. So like and then I started to think about that, and that's what you sort of like, you coalesce the thought. You go, okay, what would that be like? And then you say to yourself, is it doable, and do I know enough? And then you go do some research on it, and then maybe you just don't like it. The very notion is that every game I start with doing is I come up with solutions, I come up with ideas, I come up with thought processes, and then eventually I just scrap a bunch of things that don't feel right. Like I even just talking about Lords of Dogtown and like surf culture, it just didn't feel right. And me talking it out loud, it's just like, oh, that doesn't. So then let's go back and let's refigure it out. I want to do a surf game. Okay, that's all we want to know. That's all I know for sure. And I've had an idea and it didn't feel right, so I'm gonna go back. Okay, what's the next thing? Well, I really did like I like the Lilo and Stitch thing about like family and surfing as a togetherness sort of situation. Okay, that sounds pretty cool. I feel good about that. I feel good about like let's focus on the heritage of surfing and the notion of like how it brings together family. And okay, so then it's a family game. Maybe what we want to do is ask next, which is okay, so we're going to talk about cultural heritage, we're going to talk about surfing. I know that like I know I said like I wasn't interested in figuring out the mechanic of surfing, but it would be pretty interesting to try to figure out like some sort of riding wave, type of thing. Like I think the cool thing about like surfing for me is not the tricks necessarily, but the notion of like riding a wave. So instead of like the competition things, I think like a wave riding game would be pretty fun. Like, so now I've got some notions here. I've got some ideas. I've done some concepts. I'm thinking out loud. So this is sort of how my mind processes things and how my mind is thinking about things. Okay, so and now I've pulled out a pen and I'm scrolling on a piece of paper because I need to like draw things out and write things out. So I've got surfing family. That's important. And I've got sort of like wave riding, which is pretty fun. I think that's the whole thing about how to ride a wave and the balancing of it all. I think that the notion is that, yeah, we are doing a surfing game, but not surfing competition, so nothing super serious. We don't want to do anything. It's really more about like surfing culture, which is what I really want to stay with from the earlier part. So surfing culture works really well. Let's take place in Hawaii. I think Hawaii would be a lot of fun. I think I like the Lilo and Stitch vibe of the game. So so now I've sort of constructed some words here. I have them on paper. It says surfing, surfing family, wave riding, surfing culture, Hawaii. Okay, so I don't know a lot about these things, and I'm not fully aware of surfing culture or Hawaii or other things. So what I'm going to do is what I would likely do in such a scenario, which is I'd look it up, because so yes, some people look up stuff before they do games. I look up stuff after I've started the concept, because I don't really want things out there to influence my decision. So I'm looking at Hawaii surf culture, and since I really want this to have some sort of authenticity to it, maybe I would and so now just stick to Hawaii surf culture, and let's try to look around and see what is there. And so I am going to look up the history of Hawaii, surfing Hawaii culture, National Geographic. I think this is a interesting thing to start with. So surfing was once a sport of island chiefs. Today it binds Hawaiians to their cultural identity. So that's very important to know. You want to be authentic as much as possible. I think as long as you are being, courteous, and you're understanding, and I'm not going to try to make a game about Hawaiians necessarily, but I think it's something to look into potentially. And I don't know, and something where you don't want to say, I'm not going to write a game because I'm worried about the sensitivity of it. Like, write the game and then we go through sensitivity reading afterwards. And if you feel like maybe it's not your voice, then maybe you should involve somebody early. But it just really depends on project to project. And a lot of it is project to project. I am Filipino. Island culture is in my blood, and there's a lot of Filipinos who came to Hawaii. And so that's something that I'm fully aware of through my Asian studies discourse classes, that a lot of Filipinos and Chinese and came to the work in the dole plantations and in Hawaii. And so that's something that I think I want to be aware of. So I'm sort of scrolling through this. I'm not trying to read. So National Geographic Pure Hawaiian says that the concept of surfing probably developed around South Pacific islands such as the Marquesas, and Tahiti. How the sport popular get to Hawaii? How did it get to the rest of the world? So I'm sort of just scrolling. I'm not trying to do anything too deep right now, but I'm trying to come up with concepts. Festival celebrations, cultural identity. It's very much ingrained. I'm just surf etiquette in Hawaii. That's another article in here. The importance of surfing in ancient Hawaii and the legend Duke. Beyond board shorts, the rich history of Hawaiian surf culture. So yeah, this is something that might be pretty fun to do. I really would like to be as authentic as possible. So it's really like, it doesn't have to be. So I'd like to do research, and I know some people will say, well, it's not your culture, you shouldn't say anything about it. And I just think that's kind of not fair. I'm not a person that does that feels like you shouldn't write a game just because, it's not your culture. But if I can, I will likely try to find, if I was to write this game, I would try to find somebody that maybe is Hawaiian, or someone I could talk to, so I can learn more about their culture. If I was to do that. But again, I could do this as about Filipinos in Hawaii, which there are a lot of us in Hawaii. So it is very much part of, like, I could just contact one of my cousins. I think I have a cousin. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I have a cousin in Hawaii. I've never been to Hawaii myself. But I like this notion of, like, family and culture and identity. And maybe, what would be pretty interesting is it could be something like teaching family how to surf, or something like that. And it could just be about like exploring cultural identity, or it could just be about exploring the islands. It could be a really fun game about just understanding how important Hawaiian culture is. So it can be something that might be educational. And so, I'm going to write educational on here because I think just reading some of this stuff is pretty fascinating. So we want to be able to teach a little bit, and make sure we have good resources and some good information. I'm not saying that this is exactly the game I'm writing, but I'm not going to write this game. But this is sort of like how my mind thinks. I have words, and I have like the idea of wave writing is pretty cool. And if I was gonna do wave writing, how would I want to do that? And I imagine that you have to have like a D6 or something, and the idea is that you have a tilting thing, like a line. I'm drawing a line here, and I imagine that you have to have two D6s on each side, and you roll, and you have to try to get a balance. And the longer you can balance between the two dice, the longer your character can stay on the surfboard. I think that's pretty neat. I think the notion of like this sense of like two die balancing thing where you have to get them to be as equal as possible. And so that mechanic we have to find ways to be able to create that balance through shifts, through player action, through player decision. And that's where we start. So we're going to be looking at, because it's very important in this balance. Like we notion of standing on a surfboard is very difficult, and you have to be able to balance it. And maybe it doesn't have to be 2 dice. Maybe it's 4 dice. And maybe as you ride this wave, and I've drawn a cross X. So there's a dice on the top, dice on the left, dice on the right, dice on the back, and you have to shift your character in some sort of way to be able to make those dice move up or down. And by moving those dice up or down, you create sort of like a balance between the board. And so that could just mean that like certain waves can affect it. It could mean that, and these are just so that could just mean that you have when a wave comes in, and you decide to try to ride it, you also have to have a stand-up component where you have to be laying on the board and you have to jump back up on it, and then that's it. So that could be the moment you jump up, you have to roll all 4 dice, and as you get better, there has to be a component of growth that makes it easier as you play more, because it can't just be like, oh, every time you jump up on the board, roll your 4 dice, and then you like fall off. Well, that's the intention, is that you're supposed to get better at it. So the more you fall off, the better. So now we're sort of creating this game component of like a person who lays down flat. You take 4 d6s and you roll them. And so say the first is 4, a 3, a 2, and a 1. So the top number is a 3. So imagine I'm drawing a cross. I'm drawing a cross because you can balance on the left, you can balance on the right, you can balance on the front of the board or the back of the board. So imagine that the top number is 4, the back number is a 3, the left number is a 2, and the right number is a 6. So we're misbalanced here, right? Like clearly this was so. We have to try to figure out a construct that would make this change cause you to wipe out. So how do we determine that? Maybe each number corresponds to a possible action, or maybe the total value. Like if you total all the values, say it's like 4, 10, 13, 15, of like 15 on a roll chart means you stand, and okay, cool, and then you roll, and then you sort of like tell stories and then it could be a story about telling stories about family. So this could be a really cool thing where like, okay, you're able to, on like a 13, like on a 12, you're able to stand, or you're able to ride the wave. Who taught you how to, this could be a very story focused game. So who taught you how to surf, and And so maybe it's less about the mechanic of it. So maybe this is just a way to. These are really cool ways to. This could be a way to tell stories of like family and connectedness, and that's a way to like change numbers. So like it's 15. If you answer this, you can re-roll a die, and so you can attempt to change a die to a better number. So you can be like, oh, okay. So maybe 15 is who taught you how to swim, and you can say my grandfather, and Charlie. He taught me how to swim for the first time, and he was a brave. So this could just be a chart. So if you're gonna do a chart, we do the total number. So if all numbers are 1, that's a minimum 4. And if all numbers are 6, that's a maximum 24. And then you have to say, okay, perfect balances are going to be within those 424. Yeah, 24. Yeah, 24. Yeah. And then, perfect balance will be 24 for 20 16 gosh, I'm so bad. No, is it? Yeah, that's 16. And then 12, and then 8. So these are the perfect balance numbers. So 4, 8, 12, 20, 24. We have a number 2. 2.5 is the average number. So somewhere between 2.5 plus 2. So you're looking at 10. The 10 spot is where the medium number is going to land. So anything lower than 10 should be considered like failures. No, it's not. Sorry, did I do the math wrong? Sorry, my apologies. It's actually 3.5. Sorry, it's 3.5 is considered the median number between in a die. So that would be 14. So anything in the 14 marker. Am I doing math? Yeah, I'm not doing math right. 1, 2, 3, and 0.5. 4, 5, 6, 0.5. So, yeah, so 3.5 is roughly where you say that the average number is going to land. So, adding those 4 together, you're going to average of 14 across the board. So, 14 is the middle number. So, this is the point. So, this is where we see it. 14 is where we stand, and anything below 14 is considered tougher, is bad, it's not going to be great, and the closer to 14 it's going to be better. The closer to 14 it'll get better, the further away from 14 it'll get worse. And that's the same to go the opposite. The closer you get to 24, which is the highest possible number, the better it's going to get. And the closer you get to 14, the less better it's get. So, like the degrees of difficulty. So we're looking at from a scale of 4 all the way to 24. And middle is number 14. So everything below 14 is bad. Everything above 14 is good. And that's 10 numbers going up, 10 numbers going down. And so this is how we create a chart. and maybe this is a storytelling game. So now we're looking at a storytelling game because we really wanted to focus on family and connectedness. And so all of the questions should center on so maybe everything above 14 should be positive, good things, and everything below 14 should be like hardships and struggles, and it should talk about the legacies of surfing. So this could be like a big family day, and so each of your player will roll these dice to create balance on the board, and once you get balance, then one of these either 4, 8, 16, 20, 24 tells the story of important things in your family. And the more balances you create, the better you sort of can develop the story of your family. So if you play this game, you're trying to create a balance wave. So maybe you get 3 rolls per player, and so each player gets to try to create this sort of perfect 4-digit exact number that you're trying to do. And so along the way, you're rolling the dice and trying to create this sort of balance. And along the way, you're telling the stories of your family, and you're telling the stories of each other and your players, and there we go. That's the game. It's the notion of the game. It's the notion of telling these stories about how we're all connected, and the questions should go from deeper roots of like how we got here, why we're here. So it could be Filipino culture. It could be how did your family emigrate to to this country. It can be what was lost or what was taken from you. It could be stuff about like it could be very educational. We can really focus on a lot of different components. So as you see, as I've gone through, I've created in essence a dice balancing mechanic based off of Hawaii, and how I constructed it from beginning to end, throwing things away, figuring things out, and finding what I like, and finding, and yeah, this isn't done by no notion. I'd have to try to figure out questions. I think like I think each of the key numbers for 8, 16, 20, 24, can lead to a scene. It might just be a thing where we lead it to a scene where we get to learn about either like history, or we get to unlock something about your past. Like, so it could just, this could be a very like, centered game where there's a story that's based off of like hitting these numbers, or learning about the history of surfing, which is pretty cool. And then you could use the rest of the numbers to sort of tell the true story. So yeah, so you'd really only have about 7 numbers that you can possibly have on top or bottom, and bottoms are tragedies, tops are great, or like triumphs, and so and it could even be more personal. We could go that road where we can talk about like moving away from home, or learning to find yourself, finding clarity through the waves. And there's so many different options to do this game. But I mean, I think like the notion that if you had these 4 things and what you're trying to do is make a perfect ride. And to get a perfect ride, you need to have 4 numbers be exact. And that mathematically can be very difficult. So you have to total everything, answer a question, and then retotal everything again. And I think that's a fun notion. I think that's pretty cool. I think that's a good way to stop here. I hope you liked it. I hope you enjoyed this. I don't know if this is something that you talking through a game, but I have the little napkin here, and I drew little doodles, and from start to end, this is how I would create a surfing game. This has been Gilbert with the Unnamed Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this episode 5. If you like what we're doing, or if you like a specific thing that we've been doing, let us know. The unnamedgameco@gmail.com. We're pretty open about just, hey, if you like us, send us an email. Like and subscribe down below. And we will see you next time on episode 6, which will cover, I don't know, something, maybe. Have a good day.